In the beginning, the world was perfect, a paradise unlike any other. The Garden of Eden, a realm untouched by time, is bathed in golden light. The air was pure, the rivers clear, and the land stretched endlessly with beauty. Lush trees reached for the sky, their leaves whispering in the wind. Animals roamed freely, living in peace. No pain, no fear, just harmony. Adam and Eve, the first human, walked beside the Creator himself, basking in the glow of eternal joy. A world without flaw, a perfect world. Within this paradise stood something strange, a tree different from all other, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It wasn't like the other trees that bore fruit for nourishment. This tree was forbidden, a single command etched into the very fabric of their existence. Do not eat from this tree. God had given Adam and Eve everything they could ever want, yet this one tree stood apart with a warning. The day you eat from it, you will surely die. Why place a tree of temptation in a perfect world? Why create a choice if the consequences were so severe? Why give them the ability to fail, knowing full well what would happen if they did? The tree, its fruit glimmering with mystery, became the center of a cosmic question. What was the real purpose behind its existence? Was it a test, a trap, or something deeper, something hidden beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself? And then, the question that would haunt humanity forever. Why did God place a forbidden tree in the Garden of Eden if he knew Adam and Eve would eat from it? Before time itself existed, before the stars were born, before the earth even took shape, it was only one thing: pure, brilliant light of God's presence. This was a world beyond time, a realm untouched by darkness or chaos. It was perfect, flawless. God, in all his glory, sat upon a throne of unimaginable power, surrounded by a choir of countless angels, their voices rising in eternal worship. Everything was as it should be, a kingdom of light. But even in this perfect realm, a moment was coming that would change everything. And then, with a voice that shook the very heaven, God spoke. Let us create. With those words, the void was shattered. Darkness exploded into light, and the earth began to take shape, chaotic, empty, and cold. Nothing lived, nothing moved, but God's presence filled the void, and with each command, something new came to light. Let there be light. Suddenly, the void was flooded with radiance. The earth began to stir, and the first landmass rose from the ocean's depths. The sky stretched open, trees grew, rivers flowed, and animals appeared. It was a masterpiece, and God, gazing upon his work, saw that it was good. But still, something was missing. On the sixth day, God formed man. He shaped Adam from the dust of the earth. With his very breath, God gave Adam light. And as Adam opened his eyes, he saw the wonder of Eden, a paradise filled with every beauty and every need fulfilled. The air was sweet, the rivers clear, the trees heavy with fruit. Yet as God looked at his creation, a sense of unease washed over it. It is not good for man to be alone, God said. So, with a word, he put Adam into a deep sleep. From his side, God took a rib, and from it, he formed Eve, a companion, someone to stand beside Adam and share the beauty of Eden. When Adam awoke and saw Eve, the world seemed to settle. She was perfect, his equal, his other half. Together, they were to walk the earth, live in harmony, and experience the endless wonders of their paradise. But even in this perfect world, there was a shadow. God gave them a command. You may eat from every tree in this garden, every single one, but of the tree in the center of the garden, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you shall not eat. For if you do, you will surely die. It seemed simple enough. One rule in an endless sea of freedom. The fruit was forbidden, yet everything else, everything in Eden was there. But why the one rule? Why place temptation in the middle of paradise? What was God testing? Days turned into weeks, and life in the garden was perfect. Adam and Eve walked with God in the cool of the day, talking with him as a friend. They had everything they needed, but in the silence of the perfect garden, something dark began to slither. The serpent. It wasn't like any other creature in the garden. Its eyes were clever, calculated. It knew exactly what to say. One day, it found Eve alone, standing near the forbidden tree. Did God say you can't eat from every tree in the garden? The serpent hissed, his voice low and silky, wrapped in suspicion and intrigue. Eve turned to face him, an unease creeping up her spine. We may eat the fruit of the trees in the garden, she answered, but of the fruit from the tree in the middle of the garden, God said, you shall not eat it, nor shall you touch it, lest you die. The serpent smirked, its tongue flicking in and out. You won't die, it whispered. God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be open. You will be like him, knowing good and evil. His words twisted in her mind like a poison slowly taking root. Why would God withhold such knowledge from them? What if this was their chance to be more? To understand the world as God did? The serpent's voice promised something greater, something more powerful. Eve looked at the fruit. It gleamed in the sunlight, so innocent yet so tempting. She felt drawn to it, her heart racing. You won't die. The serpent's voice echoed in her ear. She reached out, her fingers trembling as she plucked the fruit from the tree. She took a bite. For a brief moment, everything seemed normal, but then everything changed. Her eyes opened. The world around her shifted. The beauty of Eden, once so pure, now seemed distant. She felt naked, not just physically but exposed, vulnerable. The weight of the decision pressed down on her chest. She had done it. She had disobeyed God. Without thinking, she turned to Adam, who was standing beside her. He didn't speak, but their eyes met. She held out the fruit to him, and Adam ate. The moment he bit into the fruit, the world shattered. In the blink of an eye, everything they had known, the peace, the harmony, the closeness to God, was gone. The silence that followed was deafening. Adam and Eve looked at each other, ashamed, their once perfect bond now fractured. Suddenly, in the distance, they heard it, the familiar sound of footsteps, the footsteps of God, coming to walk with them in the cool of the day. But this time, their hearts pounded with fear. They had sinned. They ran, hiding themselves among the trees. The perfect garden, once their home, now felt like a prison. Where are you? God called, his voice echoing through the trees, searching, loving, but heavy with sorrow. Adam's voice trembled as he responded. I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid, and so began the unraveling of paradise. The moment of their disobedience had torn apart the perfect world God had made. The relationship they once shared with God, so intimate and free, was now broken. Eden, once the symbol of everything good, was now a place of sorrow and regret. The serpent had won, but the story had only just begun. Adam and Eve, once free in the perfect garden, now stood broken in exile. Eden, their paradise, was lost forever. But deep within the folds of that perfect, now ruined world, there was a story far older, far darker than the one they had just lived. A story that began long before the creation of man. A story that no one in Eden could have understood at the time. Lucifer, long before God had formed the heavens and the earth, long before the stars had filled the night sky, there was a great rebellion. Lucifer, once the most beautiful and powerful of all the angels, stood in the very presence of God. He was a light bringer, the shining one, the one who carried God's glory into the universe. But something dark stirred within him, a seed of pride. He had been at the center of all creation, bathed in divine glory, yet he began to question, why should I serve? Why should I bow to God when I am as great as he? Lucifer's rebellion was not born in a single moment. It had been building slowly until it consumed him completely. He no longer saw himself as a servant of God, but as a rival. He began to gather others, whispering in the hearts of the angels who served alongside him. He promised them glory, power, and a future without God. Why should we be bound by his will? He asked. We deserve more. We deserve to rule. Lucifer, with his silver tongue, led a third of the heavenly hosts in a mutiny, a war in heaven. They sought to overthrow God, to take his throne, to challenge his authority. The clash that followed was unlike anything that could be fathomed. Angels battled angels, their light and power clashing in a violent storm that shook the very foundations of heaven itself. But Lucifer had underestimated one thing. God knew. Even before the first rebellious thought had crossed Lucifer's heart, God knew what would happen. He knew the pride that would rise in Lucifer, the one who had been so close to him. And though God gave Lucifer every opportunity to choose righteousness, Lucifer's pride grew. He could not be reasoned with. He could not be stopped. The rebellion raged on. It was swift. It was brutal. In the end, Lucifer and his followers were cast down from heaven and expelled from the divine presence. God did not need to fight with his own hand. His will was enough. Lucifer's beauty, his power, his glory, all of it was stripped away in an instant. He fell like a comet, cast out of the heaven, plunging into the darkness below. He was no longer Lucifer, the light bringer. He was Satan, the adversary, the accuser. He had lost everything, but one thing remained, his hatred for God. He would never forgive God for casting him down. He would never forgive humanity for being what he could never be, created in God's image, able to walk in the light of God's presence. And so, he became a force of destruction, of deception, of manipulation. His sole purpose now was to prove to God that his creation could not be trusted, and that no matter what God did, Lucifer would always be able to bring about rebellion, chaos, and pain. Lucifer, having lost heaven, turned his wrath upon God's creation, and then, in the fullness of time, God made man. Adam, Eve, they were perfect, without sin, and placed in the perfect paradise of Eden. God walked among them, spoke to them, and lived with them. It was a love that Lucifer could never experience again. It was a grace that he could never know. It was the perfect gift, and Lucifer could not stand it. He watched from the shadows, seething with envy, with anger. He knew, he understood, he knew that if he could get them to fall, if he could tempt them to disobey God, then he would have done what he could not do in heaven. He would ruin the perfect creation of perfect love. He would prove that no creation, no matter how perfect, could ever be trusted. And so, Lucifer slithered into the garden, wearing the face of a serpent. His voice, smooth as honey, carried the weight of centuries of malice. He had watched them, studied them. He knew exactly how to strike. He whispered to Eve. He questioned God's command, sowing doubt in her heart. Has God indeed said, you shall not eat of every tree of the garden? It was subtle, a soft seed planted in the fertile ground of her mind. She was curious, innocent, yet Lucifer knew just how to twist her thoughts, how to make her question. You won't surely die, he promised. For God knows that in the day you eat it, your eyes will be open, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. He dangled before her the very thing he had sought himself, the ability to be like God, the very thing that had led him to fall in the first place. And Eve, deceived, took the fruit, she ate, and then she gave it to Adam, who too succumbed. And so it happened. The fall, the tragedy, the sin. God's voice thundered through the silent air of Eden, breaking the stillness with the weight of his righteous fury. His words were not a roar of uncontrolled wrath, but a deliberate pronouncement that could not be undone. The disobedience of Adam and Eve had broken something sacred, and now the consequences would follow. Because you have done this, God declared, his voice steady. Cursed are you above all livestock and every beast of the field. On your belly you shall go, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life. The serpent had been cursed, stripped of its former glory, and consigned to a life of crawling through the dust. But the pronouncement of judgment did not stop there. God turned to Eve, his gaze filled with sorrow yet unyielding. I will greatly multiply your sorrow and your conception. In pain you shall bring forth children. The weight of the punishment was heavy, and yet within it there was a thread of hope. Finally, God's gaze rested upon Adam, and he spoke, because you have heeded the voice of your wife, and have eaten from the tree of which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground for your sake. No longer would the earth yield its bounty with ease. Every harvest would come at the cost of sweat and struggle. But God's judgment, though just and heavy, was not finished. He could not allow Adam and Eve to remain in the garden, not after their fall. The paradise they had known would never be the same. And so, with a sorrowful yet firm hand, he cast them out of Eden, sending them into the harsh world beyond. Yet God did not abandon them completely. For as Adam and Eve were exiled from the garden, a new presence filled the air, majestic, fierce, and unyielding. The cherubim had arrived. Two of these mighty angels, glowing with an intense, otherworldly light, stood guard at the entrance to Eden. Their flaming swords flickered and crackled, shimmering with divine power. They were not mere guards. They were God's appointed watchers, set to prevent any further access to the tree of life. The purpose of the cherubim was not simply to keep Adam and Eve away. It was to enforce a boundary that could never again be crossed. They would stand as the final symbol of God's judgment, keeping humanity from the grace they had so recklessly thrown away. The garden, once a place of perfect fellowship, was now sealed, protected by the blazing fire of divine justice. But amid the pronouncement, amid the casting out, amid the tragic consequences, there lingered an unanswered question: the forbidden fruit. Why place it there at all? It was a question that would gnaw at the back of the mind like an ever-present shadow. Why would a perfect God create a moment where disobedience was not just possible but almost inevitable? Why set a trap? Why tempt them at all? The question echoed in the minds of many and in the whispers of time itself. Why would God, a perfect and all-knowing creator, place the forbidden fruit in the Garden of Eden, knowing full well the danger it posed? Why set the stage for a fall when he could have easily kept the fruit hidden or removed it entirely? It was a question that seemed to cut to the core of divine logic. Why give Adam and Eve the ability to make such a catastrophic choice? Why not protect them completely, shielding them from the consequences of their desire? And yet, the answer wasn't as simple as temptation. It wasn't a cosmic trap set to trick them. No, God's decision was far more profound, woven with a deep, eternal wisdom that humanity could scarcely understand. The forbidden fruit wasn't a tool of evil, nor a snare. It was a test of love and trust. It was God's way of granting true freedom to his creation. To fully grasp it, we must first understand the very nature of love. Love, true and pure, can never be forced. It cannot be dictated by command alone. For love to exist, it must come from the heart, chosen freely and unconditionally. If God had not given Adam and Eve the choice to disobey, their love and obedience would have been meaningless. Their devotion would have been robotic, a mere reflection of divine control rather than a response to love. The forbidden fruit was not there to make them stumble. It was there to allow them to show trust and love for their creator. God could have easily kept them in a perfect state of blissful ignorance, but that would not have been freedom. Without choice, there could be no authentic relationship. Imagine for a moment that God had placed them in a world without any boundary, no rule, no consequences. It would have been paradise, yes, but it would have been paradise without purpose. Their obedience would have been a mere instinct, a default behavior with no depth. But by giving them the choice to obey or to disobey, God provided them with something infinitely more precious: freedom to love. It's a paradox, isn't it? To give freedom, knowing that it could lead to failure, knowing that it could lead to heartbreak. But it was in that freedom that Adam and Eve were allowed to freely choose God, and that in turn would create the most beautiful and meaningful love story ever told. Now, imagine Lucifer watching from the shadows as God prepared this test. He had fallen long before, with his pride swelling as he sought to be greater than God. Lucifer understood the true power of free will. He knew it was the key to controlling hearts, to turning them against their creator. And as God placed that tree in the center of Eden, Lucifer's heart must have twisted with anticipation. He knew this moment was coming, the moment when God's perfect creation could be torn apart, when humanity humanity would make its choice. As Adam and Eve stood at the crossroads of choice, Lucifer, now the serpent, slithered into the garden, eager to exploit their curiosity and desire for more. His plan was simple: sow doubt in their heart, twist God's words, paint a picture of autonomy, convince them that by taking the fruit, they would be free from God's authority, just as he had once tried to break free from God's reign. It was a moment of cosmic tension, where the very essence of humanity's freedom was tested. God, knowing full well the consequences of their choices, had already made a provision for the fall. But the tree, that single tree, was always part of his greater design. It was the boundary between the good that God had planned for them and the chaos that would follow from their disobedience. And as the serpent whispered his lies, as the fruit glistened under the light of Eden, the choice lay before them. Will you trust in God's wisdom, or will you choose your path? It was a choice that defined them. But this question was not just about them. It was about love. It was about God's desire for his creation to respond to him, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. And that is why the forbidden fruit was placed there, not as a trap, but as the test of their hearts. Would they choose to trust in the one who had created them, or would they let their curiosity and desire for power lead them astray? The tree, in all its mystery and significance, was never meant to be merely a physical object in the Garden of Eden. It was a symbol, a divine marker placed by God to present Adam and Eve with an essential choice. More than just a fruit, it represented the possibility of trust. God's design was to offer humanity a profound opportunity, a chance to choose him, to respond to his love freely. The tree was not a trap, nor was it a tool of destruction. It was the gatekeeper of freedom. It was a means through which Adam and Eve could either express trust and obedience to their Creator, or pursue their understanding of what was good and right. The choice was there, but it was only made possible because of the tree. Through that decision, humanity's vulnerability was laid bare. Adam and Eve were not perfect, and they were capable of failing. Their failure revealed the fragility of the human heart. Curiosity, pride, and the desire for autonomy can quickly overtake trust in God. But in that vulnerability, we also see the great depth of God's unrelenting love. For even in the moment of their failure, God did not abandon them. He pursued them, seeking to restore what was broken. The tree, in its stark reality, was how humanity's heart was tested, and by which God's plan of redemption began to unfold. The story of the tree and the choice in the garden is not just a tale from the past. It carries powerful lessons for us today. Lessons that resonate deeply with the challenges we face in our own lives. The challenge is clear. We are presented daily with choices, some of them small, others monumental. The question is, how will we respond? Will we trust in God, even when the path seems unclear or the consequences are daunting? Will we trust his wisdom when everything else around us pushes us to take matters into our own hands? Just as Adam and Eve faced uncertainty and the temptation to trust in themselves, we too are constantly faced with moments where our trust in God is tested. When life presents its challenges, when we don't understand why things happen the way they do, it's easy to question. But God's purpose for humanity remains unchanged. He calls us to trust him, not because we have all the answers, but because he knows what is best for us, even in the face of uncertainty. Just as God provided for Adam and Eve after their fall, he provides for us today, offering grace, wisdom, and the promise of redemption. The lessons of the tree call us to live in the freedom of choice, a freedom that leads us to trust God's love, even when we can't see the full picture. Just as the tree was a test in the beginning, today's decisions are opportunities for us to choose him, trust his guidance, and follow his way, even when the world seems to offer us an easier path. God's unrelenting love remains steadfast, just as it was in Eden, and his plan for us is filled with purpose. The story of the tree, the test of trust, and the choice Adam and Eve made show us that while we are vulnerable, we are also deeply loved and constantly pursued by a God who desires to restore us and walk with us through life. Our trust in him aligns us with his divine purpose, and even in our moments of failure, his grace remains more than sufficient. If you like this video and want to dive deeper into topics like these, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Join the community and be a part of the conversation. Let's keep exploring, learning, and growing together. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.